Welcome to the Social Engineer Podcast, a Human Element series. This is episode 218. Can't believe we're that far in the 200s. I'm Chris Hadnaghi, CEO and founder of Social Engineer, and I've been hosting this podcast since way back in 2009. And as always, the sponsor for this episode of the podcast is our company, Social Engineer. We have our brand new website, which has been out now for quite a few months. But if you're interested in the topic of social engineering and you're worried about your company, maybe you're worried about figuring out how you can stay safe from phishing, one of the new biggest threats out there being used by threat actors around the globe, you can go check out our website and see what kind of services we offer to help you and your employees stay safe from the threat of phishing. And if you're into education on the topic of social engineering, we have a whole host of classes coming up, and we'll have our schedule out for the rest of 2023 and even some dates in the 2024. So you can check that at social-engineer.com. And if you love the topic of social engineering, then please come to our Slack channel. We have over 1,500 people in there now talking about social engineering each and every day. We even have a small group that gets together once every couple of weeks to practice. They do elicitation practice and other things just to keep their skills fresh. A lot of people that are in the industry come in to get ideas on their pretext and other things, as well as just enthusiasts and people who are interested in the topic of social engineering. The link is in the show notes, so you can check it out down there. Or if you can't find it, just ping me on Twitter or LinkedIn. I'd be more than happy to get you connected with our Slack channel. I also want to take a moment to invite everyone who's listening to go check out InnocentLivesFoundation.org. If you're not familiar with our nonprofit over there, I'm so proud of the group. Our mission is to help law enforcement geolocate and track people who traffic children and create child abuse material. And now for the last almost 6 years, we're close to 500 cases that we've been able to submit to law enforcement, meaning that we've helped track down that many groups, trafficking groups, or people who are harming children and put them in the hands of law enforcement so they can be apprehended. Our global organization works really hard with law enforcement across the whole globe to make sure that we can help just put even a small dent in this problem. So if you want to support us by volunteering, you can find out more information at InnocentLivesFoundation.org. And if you can't volunteer, but you want to support us through monetary donations, we are a nonprofit. So please go check out the website and see how you could support us there. And if you're digging the music that starts this podcast or finishes it, then you must be a fan of Clutch, the best rock and roll band on earth. So go over and check them out at pro-rock.com. Pick up one of their songs or go see their show. They're always touring, so you really enjoy that, especially seeing them live is one of the best things you can do. And a nice shout out to FeedSpot, who put the Social Engineer podcast on the top 20 cybersecurity podcasts for beginners. And we're number 5. We're really proud of that. We're up there with some really great podcasts like Darknet Diaries. So feel free to go check them out. The link will be in the show notes, and you can see other podcasts that might interest you if you're really into the topic of cybersecurity. Okay, let's get to our guest today. I'm really excited about this topic. You'll know from if you listen to this show ever before that this is a topic that we talk about a lot. But let me introduce our guest today. It's Patrick McAndrew. Now, he's the founder and CEO of a company called HARA. This company focuses on developing the whole person. Now, this might sound, what does that even mean? Well, knowing that high performance is determined by how you live and not just how you work. And that's a really big topic for us in InfoSec, isn't it? Because we kind of pride ourselves on overworking, which is not really healthy. So Patrick helps develop habits of the mind to thrive in competitive environments. He's trained leaders and high performance teams to bring more structure into their lives for greater focus, energy, productivity, mental resilience, and life balance. That is the topic that we're really going to want to get into today. He's got a background in corporate law. You might think, wow, lawyer to what? Well, he moved over to sales. And then he was leading an expansion of a company called BriteVenue across North America. And that was a venue for software for weddings and other types of events. Then in 2018, he worked with Iris as a high performance coach and instructor to hedge funds, investment banks, and MBA programs. I don't know how we're going to follow this path, right? Lawyer, sales, hedge funds. And then what does he do? Not the natural progression, but he launched his first business, which was an audio marketing business, which launched Spotify's first global audio marketing campaign to brands and agencies. And then a year later is when he launched Momentum Mind, which became HARA, which is the company we're talking about today. Patrick, fascinating journey, but really great to have you here. Thanks for joining us on the show.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Chris.
Okay, so your path. It doesn't sound like something where you go, oh, I see how that led to that. How did you go from lawyer to a high performance coach? That doesn't even make sense.
Yeah, it doesn't, but it does as well so much in hindsight. Yeah, I mean, I could give you a condensed version of those paths and what led to all of this. I studied law in university. It was international law, so a year of that was spent in France. During that year, to be honest with you, Chris, I never really had a great love for law. I thought it was quite boring, certainly in the way that it was presented to me. There was only a few subjects that I actually found kind of interesting. But nonetheless, when I went to France, here I was. The way that lectures happen in France is basically because it's all built on the Code du Civil. A professor will come in with this massive book, and they'll come in out of the course with their wig and their gown and everything, and they'll sit in front of you for 90 minutes and just read from the book. And here I was trying to process French and French law at the same time. And if you lost a sentence, it felt nearly impossible to catch up. And built on top of that was my lack of innate interest in the subject anyway. So I started working in a gastropub, and I became much more interested in that experience than what university had to offer me. And that led me to want to pursue a path in the food industry, which led me to New York. And I did that for 2.5 years. And then I wanted to get a taste for business. And then I moved into sales. During that time in the restaurant industry, I launched my own podcast with the Heritage Radio Network, which are based out of Brooklyn, called Why Food, which went on to produce I think it was about 170 episodes. So then after my time in audio and food and also in business, I tried to merge the two worlds together, and I created an audio marketing agency. And we managed to secure Spotify as a client, and we did their first global audio marketing campaign, which was translated into, I think, 11 languages for their different markets. And during that time, I took a course in speed reading to help myself. And I became fascinated by the subject matter that I, on the side, just out of my pure interest, worked for Iris, the speed reading company, on the side, traveling to different schools and colleges and companies around the United States, teaching these courses on reading and memory. And what I learned is that no matter where you go in your career, no matter what you're exposed to in the educational system, whether you go to study at Columbia University or a community college, you never learn about the internal tools that are actually determining everything. You only learn about the actual skills related to the task, but there's something beneath that. There's these cognitive skills or human skills or social skills or emotional skills. And the one that was missing the most was attention and focus, because I saw from 14-year-olds to 64-year-olds, everywhere I went, I saw fractured minds. There was a lot of motivation, there was a lot of drive, but there was an incapacity to actually organize their own attention. And that's when I closed down the audio marketing business, because I was in a meeting talking about how we were going to make Captain Morgan sell for this next. I was in Diageo's offices, and I thought, what are we doing? We're here calling ourselves creatives. This is not creative. This is not contributing to anything. So in my malaise, I decided I'm not doing this anymore. There's something much more interesting to pursue. And that's when I closed that business down and started the one that I did. And here we are 3 years later.
So you did make the path make sense. That's fascinating. Okay, so let's jump into that topic, because in our industry and on this podcast we talk about our control, controlling our attention or our focus a lot. The world, I remember, and this is going to make me sound really old, but I remember times when we just go outside with a box and a stick, and we can create fun. Right. And I mean, we didn't have a lot of stuff when I was growing up. So my little red wagon, a box and a stick and a couple wiffle ball bats, and my brother and I would be out there for a whole day creating adventure. Right now, it seems like in the world where everything's a 30 or 60 second video and it needs to be constantly feeding me new content, it seems almost impossible to really regain control of our attention. So how can we do this? And maybe even first, before into how, is why is this important that we even discuss this topic?
Oh, that's a good question, Chris. That's a much nicer question to ask. I think, why is this important rather than the how? Because the how could be answered in many, many, many ways. Why is this important? Because your attention is all you have. It is your gateway to your human experience. So one of the things which is at the frontiers of research in neuroscience is, what is consciousness? It's the thing which is trying to be discovered. Like, what is it that characterizes our innate experience? So here we are, we're in front of each other on using this incredible technology we have. And I can see you and you can see me, even though it's in a limited frame. But I could spend years with you, Chris. I could spend years getting to know you, and I would never get as far enough to understand what it's like to inhabit your body and your experience of the world. I would never understand that. We all are social beings interacting with one another, be it through work or social engagements or our intimate relationships. And as close as we get to one another, there's something mysterious there, which is what is going on inside. We'll never actually uncover that. And that is our own inner landscape. That is our own inner domain and our own inner world. And there's a richness there. There's a richness within that experience. And it's available to us in depth, not at a shallow level. At a shallow level, yes, of course, there's things to see, there's things to buy, there's things to do. But there's a deeper layer there in our experience, which is the experiential elements of life, feeling things. Feeling both sadness, sorrow, and grief, but also immense joy, building things, creating things, uncovering things. Not just that, but discovering new things in the people before you. There's something that's magical and amazing when you're in conversation with one another and suddenly there's nothing left to talk about. You've covered all the superficial elements. You've caught up with each other. How's life? How's your wife? How's your sister? How's your brother? How's work? You've covered all those elements. Now there's nothing left to exhaust. So you have to actually enter into the domain of things that are unknown. You have to go and explore conversations, and out of that comes the depth of the connection with another human being. But what we need for that is we need space. We need space to access that. We need space to access that with one another. We need space to access that with ourselves. We need space to access that with the world around us. And that is our attention. There is, if we can imagine it like the ocean, there is a depth to our attention. There is something that holds us once we go deeper there. At the surface, it's choppy waters up there at the top. But once you can slip down below, there's something deeper. And what's happening with technology today, and it's not fair to blanket it in technology, but it's more engagement-based technology. So a lot of the things you're talking about are engagement-based technology, where in their curation, they are curated for the purpose of engagement. The washing machine that we have here was simply built for use and built for purpose. There's no metrics of engagement. There's no IoT built on top of it. They just want you to use the washing machine and that's it. But a lot of the other tools that we use, there is a constant feedback loop on what our degree of engagement is with the product. And that's constantly bringing us up to this surface domain of our attention. And this surface domain of our attention is more of a dopaminergic experience, where it's built on the next experience will give me the pleasure to satisfy the emptiness and the void which I'm feeling now. So I'm not experiencing it on this app, so I'll transition to this app. I'll move to this message. And after a while, you forget what you were actually seeking. It just becomes a habitual pattern. And in and of that, it removes the space for you to choose how you attend to the world. Because whenever you feel discomfort, you just become dependent on these devices to solve and to cater to that discomfort. So I think that's a reason why, is that it's manipulating and maneuvering our behavior, and that's problematic. But more problematic is that we're becoming completely unavailable to ourselves. We really do not know ourselves. And I think that's a great shame. I think that's a great shame, because we're living at a time where there's so much knowledge that's available, but there's very little innate wisdom, because innate wisdom takes time to actually settle into that. So ChatGPT is going to give us more access to more information, and that's supposedly going to make everything better. But consequentially, there's less depth that's available to us.
That's an interesting topic you just opened. AI right now is, of course, a very, very discussable topic, and everybody's either worried about it or supporting it. I'm aligned with you there on that, thinking that, well, we have this wonderful technology that's supposed to make things better. But I don't know if it makes it better, right? I mean, I can remember, and this is, again, I'm aging myself terribly, but I can remember having the first home computer. Remember when my dad brought it home, and it was revolutionary, and he was an accountant, or he did things with finances. And when I push this button, your taxes will be done in 15 to 20 minutes. And that was amazing, right? Like this thing, you can actually watch it do calculations on the screen, but 20 minutes would have been like, now you say to someone, you have to wait 20 minutes for a report to be done or something to print. Now that people are going to chuck that computer in the garbage, right? But that was supposed to revolutionize, and it did. But now it seems like new technology comes out and it's almost right away exploited, right? So I remember when Chat GPT came out, I was messing around with it, just trying to figure it out. And it was very inaccurate. I mean, a lot of the things that you would ask it questions, and I would ask questions, answers that I knew or about myself or other things, and it would come back with a lot of fluff, a lot of things that wasn't great. A month later, I mean, not like maybe even 30 days later, same exact questions, and it seemed to have learned. And now that is fascinating, but also really scary when you think that this is technology that in 30 days went from being highly overly incorrect to now having very accurate data, and data that I hadn't even uncovered on topics I was researching and asking it, and all of my vast experience and OSINT and things like that, and I wasn't uncovering those things. It is a little scary, if you ask me.
Yeah, it is, absolutely, and it's neither only good nor bad. It's not binary. There's and that's the challenge here is that we struggle often to deal with paradox. Interestingly, we really struggle to deal with paradox in the West. And the reason why we really struggle to deal with paradox in the West is because it's not built into our language. This is maybe a little bit of a tangent. It's a little bit more of a deeper exploration on things, but I think it's interesting to hold as a perspective is that our language shapes, it's an orienting function for how we see the world. Like it's known that in broadening your range of vocabulary, you are also often broadening your conscious experience because you're often able to articulate and speak to what is going on. You're able to grasp. Now, it's not guaranteed that that's broadening your experience, but it is a likelihood. But within the English language, which is based off of ancient Greek, it's very much it's based on no letter means anything. It's only when we bring them together that we actually create words. And consequently, it is much more linear. So it's created great things, like it's created things like building democracy and constitutions and creating much more kind of somewhat structured and oriented and logical forms of thinking. But then we kind of but it limits us from thinking in great abstractions. And that's where the Eastern side of things is very interesting because that's a language which is based on symbolism. So one thing can mean everything. One thing can mean the opposite to what you're saying. And that's why for us to look at Chinese medicine or to look at Ayurvedic medicine, it makes no sense because they're not saying anything. But that's because in the roots of their language, they're saying everything but nothing at the same time. And with these technologies, that's what we are experiencing. We're experiencing all the greatness and all the dread all at once. And we struggle to understand how to frame this and how to interpret it because we're so used to, we live in such a very binary world where, we see it from a political spectrum, we see it from a social spectrum, but the reality is that we live in a world of paradox. And definitely the way that information is fed to us through social media makes it challenging. It doesn't develop those faculties of our mind. It actually reduces them.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and I never really thought of it that way, especially tied up to language. One of the things that, and again, this is a tangent, but you brought it up, so I think it's fascinating. One of the things that I always interested me about ancient languages like Greek, you can look at like the word love, let's say, and in the Greek language, there was 4 or 5 different words to describe love because you didn't just say love. There's a difference between a love between, let's say, me and my wife and me and my friend, or me and an employee, or me and my desk, right? There better be differences and the love. So the Greeks created words to describe those emotions and those feelings. And now we bring it up to modern day and we just have one word. And we have to use other words surrounding that word to make sense of it, right? So if I just say I love my desk and I say in the same sentence I love my wife, I better mean something different, right? They can't be the same, right? And I have to then describe it using more words in order to do that. Or if I just leave it at that, I leave it to interpretation of the person who hears that message. And I find that part of language interesting. How in many other languages there are many words to describe the depths of something, and not just one word to describe it. So, yeah, Western culture, it does limit us. That's really fascinating to bring that up. But I want to go back to this idea of gaining control of our attention, because when I asked at first, you said there's many ways to do it. So I know we can't discuss all the ways, but let's just discuss a little bit, like how can we regain control of our attention, especially in a world like we just got done talking about AI and these things that are now coming out at lightning speed. I mean, I can remember when they first released the AI and they had to shut it down because it became a racist, like in 5 hours or something. And now you can download an endless number of apps from, your artificial intelligence girlfriend to, chat apps to just get answers to things. How do we regain control of our attention now in a world like this?
I think, okay, so there's certainly people out there who'll give you a lot of tips and tricks and techniques, and they can be helpful. But I think there's a deeper layer there, which is there's one thing which I'm going to speak about is your sense of value, your internal values. So there's a broad range of things that we can talk about here in attention, but the thing that you and I think are going to attach ourselves more to is our attention in relationship to technology. That's what we're going to be speaking about, because there's many facets of attention in different frames. So we're talking really about it in relationship to our technology, because we need technology to live and to interact with things, services, people in this world. It's a very progressive tool. It's helped us immensely. It has improved our lives in massive ways. It has introduced us and exposed us to tremendous and incredible things. It's allowed me to create a business which I would never have been able to do 15 years ago because of the tools at my disposal to travel and move around the world while I do this. It's wonderful. But within that, there are ultimately boundaries which need to be set. And this is the great challenge, is that we're now living in a world where the challenges are not chasing after the things which are no longer available to us, but it's putting up boundaries against the abundant resources coming in on top of us. So the abundant resources being the abundant quantities of information coming in on top of us. And from my experience, both personally and from those that I have coached and dealt with and people who have gone through our programs, is that reorienting your internal value of yourself makes a huge shift to this. So for a lot of people, their innate sense of value is based on their responsiveness and their availability. To see that they are needed and they are in demand is an indication that they are important in this world. And just by that very factor, another aspect to add to that is what you know. So, I mean, I was on a trip 2 weeks ago, and there was 16 people there. No, there was lots of lovely people there, but there was only 2 people on that trip who actually had original thought. Everybody else was parroting what they heard in podcasts. And as you started to probe them and started to go deeper into what the points that they were making, they could only really reinforce and represent what they had heard or what this person had said. So I make that point that, so if you're trying to constantly be aware of everything, that's another thing. You're going to make sure that you're constantly receiving and consuming information, but how deeply do you know it? How much is it actually yours? Are you just being a vessel, or are you actually processing it and morphing it into something that's actually yours, that makes sense in your world? So if these are so let's take it from the work perspective. If your basis of how you value yourself is based on how responsive you are, which is lauded and applauded, I absolutely love working with Paul, because Paul gets back to me straight away. Paul's great at his job. He's always on it. I mean, I can email him at 10 p.m. and he gets back to me straight away. And it becomes a social validation, that there's an approval basis there. And if you're in a leadership position, you best be careful about that sort of complimentary that you give, because you're reinforcing that behavior, and it's starting to confuse people that my responsiveness and my activity is traded for my output and my impact. And that's a big thing. So in a lot of circumstances, we're trading impact for activity, because we're feeling that if I am active and present and I'm sharing my message on social media, or I'm messaging all these people, then that's great. Now, the second thing that I just want to say on that is that another area where it causes a huge implication of fragmenting our attention is that we occupy many, many, many different roles at the same time, and we don't allow ourselves to separate them. So because I don't have my phone around me, because it collapses your capacity to be a sports fan, a citizen, a homekeeper, a business owner, an employee, a friend, a parent, all of that can be done through this device. So it means that through a moment's thought, God, I wonder actually what the Airbnbs are like on the Amalfi Coast. Well, I'll go and I'll have a look, and let's go and see what they look like. Let's see if there's anything available. Meanwhile, you've been trying to write an email, but it's just feeling a little bit too difficult. So you've gone and you've looked at what it'll be like to go and visit the Amalfi Coast next summer. So what this does is this makes us highly confused, because there's so many frames of reference within our mind that it makes it very difficult for us to actually orient our attention to one task at any given moment. And Linda Stone has coined this as continuous partial attention, where we're no longer living in the world of multitasking. What we've done is we're continuously partially attending to many things at once. And as a consequence, there's never any ultimate objective. So a lot of this, yes, we can talk about tips and techniques, and there's a lot of people out there who'll talk about, turn off your notifications and all of these things, but these are actually circumstantial. If you start to shift your inner belief system, that your sense of value, and if you become aware of it, is my sense of value based on how much I am needed, or is it on how I experience the world and what I create in the world? I mean, you just create a very different digital environment on the basis of that.
You know what I find fascinating in our industry, in InfoSec, I'm going to go back now like 10, 15 years, because what you said really resonates very heavily. It was almost a badge of honor if we worked like a 20-hour day, right? Like I remember telling this story in classes, how I wrote this exploit and it took me 50 hours to do it straight. Like I didn't sleep, didn't eat anything worthwhile. And it was like almost pride that I was that unhealthy, right? I mean, and then we'd go party all night, after we were done. And what the resultant of that was in our industry, we became highly unhealthy, right? Some of the smartest people on the globe, some of the people that helped create a whole industry, right? Yet we were all overweight, unhealthy, sleep deprived, terrible diets. But it became, like you said, a badge of honor to say, well, man, I worked 22 hours yesterday, and then I woke up after 2 hours of sleep and did it again. And it was almost like high five, fist bump, like, aren't you great? And then something happened during the global pandemic, at least for me, that shifted my whole value system. That constant travel, I was traveling 75% of my week on the road all the time, never sleeping, eating poor. I had gained so much weight. I was completely unhealthy. And then something happened to my value system when that was taken away. I couldn't travel. I couldn't go see clients. I couldn't get in a plane. And when the world shut down, and I'm sitting here at my desk thinking, wow, my whole business is now changed. I have to figure out what I'm going to do with my life. And I just started getting healthy. And all of it. And I remember telling myself, there's absolutely no way I can fit a workout in my day. It's impossible. I'm way too busy. Can't do it. I hired a trainer, and he said, how many hours can you give me a week? I said, none. I can give you 2 30-minute sessions. That's it. I don't have time to work out. And I honestly thought like he's just going to laugh me away. He's like, okay, well, let's do 2 30-minute sessions. 2 months into that, I'm like, I could do a third one. A month later, I'm like, I can do an hour 3 times. Month after that, I'm like, I could do 4 days a week. And now here we are sitting 2 years later, and my whole value system has changed. I don't like if I have to work a long day anymore. I make time to make sure I go to the gym. I make time to be healthy. And that really changed the way I look on my inner value system and what became important to me, right? No longer living on the internet, being proud that I have an unhealthy lifestyle. And I saw that shift happen in our industry a lot. Like a lot of people started getting healthy, and it really resonates with me what you said about that. Sure, we're talking about our attention and awareness and things like that, but what you said, I really think could apply to so many areas of life. That by really getting in touch with what is valuable to you, that can change so much. And that answer is not something I expected you to say. I kind of expected tricks and tips and like, hey, do this, do that, shut off your notifications. Like one of the things I found for me was I used to have it like if I had meetings like this, I'd make the window small so I could see my email over here and I can do multiple things at one time. And then I realized I was doing exactly what you said, constant partial attention. So I now when I have a meeting, you're full screen. There's nothing else in front of me but your face, right? So I have a little notes over here, but your face is the only thing I see. That way I'm focused on this conversation. That's a trick and a tip, right? But I loved what you said, really getting in touch with our core values.
Can I ask you, Chris, like how has that changed your experience of yourself? Like in how you relate to business, in how you feel within your own body? Like, I'm just curious, has it shifted your experience of yourself?
Yeah. Well, I love how you even reversed the interview now. This is great, but no, because this is fascinating to me. So, without getting too deep into it, we had, personally and professionally, we've had some really difficult times in the last 12 months. And I honestly felt that if I had not had that shift in my health and my values, I don't know if I would have made it. And I'm not saying like dead, but I don't know if I'd have made it mentally. There was something about saying, hey, I don't care how hard this day is. That's my morning to work out. I'm gonna go to the gym. And even if things like totally stunk, just everything was bad in the world, I'm like, nope, this is my day to hit the gym. I'm going to the gym. And this thing became a stability for me. It became a stability that even when things were not great, it changed my experience where normally, let's say in the past, I would have used other coping mechanisms like have an extra cheeseburger, drink some more whiskey, stay up later, working, whatever, quote unquote, working, doing next to nothing because I can't really focus because it's 3 a.m. And that now shifted to, I gotta go to the gym in the morning. I'm going to need some kind of sleep if I'm going to work out. Right. So It changed how I treated myself. It changed what became important to me. It changed how I handled stress. It really adjusted almost every aspect of my life, changing those core values. It really adjusted my whole life.
And this is where we come back to what we spoke about at the beginning, which is your conscious experience. What is your attention? That if your attention is linked to your conscious experience, that your conscious experience before this was much more narrow. So there were only certain things that you allowed in, even though there were so many things happening within your body, within your world, so many signals, so much information being sent from your body to yourself, telling you how you actually felt. You were unable to receive it. You were unable to process it. And oftentimes what that does is that dims our actual experience. So all of these problems start to arise in our lives, be it through our physical health or our emotional health or our social strength. And we attribute it, we go and we search out for solutions, but the answers are there within us. And that's what we're trying to, and that's what we found with our programs, that it helps people in untold ways. Yes, absolutely. They become better at work, but they become so much better as parents, more present in challenging situations because they have the space to be present. And that's where, yes, okay, I could come in with tips and techniques and that's what we do in our programs. Once we make some shifts, we can start to actually focus on the small details. Mm-hmm. But, for a lot of people, like, let's think about it. Let's step back and think about it for a second. Let's wake up and look at things. We are these human beings. Like, look at every animal that's out there, every other living animal that's out there on the planet. there's a constant succession of movements taking place. Okay, there are some which are very sedentary, but for the most part, there's a lot of movement taking place. And what our lives have become are these incredibly sedentary lives where we spend most of our day looking at this medium-sized screen. We take little breaks on the small screen and we relax in front of the large screen. And within that, there's very little break. There's very little rest taking place. Yet then we question, do I have ADHD? Do I have ADD? Or you're getting prescribed for that. There's a lot of people that have gone through our programs which have been prescribed for these types of things. And just by making some adjustments in their lives, not that we've ever told them to, because I didn't know that they were taking things like Ritalin or Adderall, but then they come and tell us, I actually don't need to take it anymore. And I feel like I can focus so much better. Because what's happening is that it's not that they can't focus, it's that their body is so agitated from the way that it's being treated, that if it could just be getting a bit more of a balanced approach to life, and that agitation that you're feeling is a signal from your body to take a break. But that break is not to shift your eye gaze into your phone. It's to go outside. It's to relax. It's to take a breath. That's what it's actually calling you to do. Whereas when you go and you just shift in and you go mindlessly into TikTok for 15 minutes, for sure, you take some sort of a break, but you never gave yourself the break that your body was actually calling for. And if that happens on a compounded manner, day in, day out, then your attention starts to fragment, and then it starts to become more and more difficult to actually organize yourself. So all of that comes from the inner value system to begin with.
That's a fascinating. So what you just said kind of links something for me. So I left a piece of the puzzle out in my story, is that before I started getting healthy, I said, I was watching this program at the beginning of pandemic that said, hey, we don't know how long this is going to be. So get a hobby that doesn't involve your work. And I'm like, okay, my work is a computer. So I live in Florida. It's a beautiful state that's mostly warm all the time. I said, you know what? I have a small garden out here. Let me start growing things. So I started planting some fruit and vegetables, and I was out of breath, just constantly digging small holes, getting on my knees. And that's when I said, I got to get healthy. Like I'm not even 50 years old and I'm out of breath planting a banana tree. Like that's ridiculous, right? Like, so that was my motivation to get healthy. But as I got healthy, I started planting more and more things, started growing all these fruits and vegetables. And then I said, you know what would really go great with fruits and vegetables is a beehive. So I went and got a beehive, and I got bees. Now I tend bees and I have honey, right? And then I planted like passion fruits, and I planted all these like roses and huge flowers and other things. And now my yard is like filled with these beautiful things and all this fruit and vegetables that I'm growing that we get to eat. And I just found that my motivation to get healthy was so I can be not out of breath doing that. And that's what I do when I want to take a break. When I want to take a break, I go out in my yard and I walk by my beehive. I check my flowers. I don't go on my phone. So that connected for me, because before I would do exactly what you just said. I need a break from work, and I would grab my phone. I would turn away from my computer, but I would just be on my little screen, flipping through Instagram or whatever, chatting with a friend, thinking that was my break. Right. But now it's like, oh, I'm going to get up. I'm going to walk outside. I'm going to go into my garden. I'm going to go check my flowers, water some plants, go look at my bees. Maybe only 5 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever it is. But that's my break now. And it just totally resets my mind to come back in and refocus on work.
And let's connect it to something deeper there, which is worth noting as well, which is that there's a rhythm in the natural environment. So when you go out and you're observing the birds and the bees, and you're looking at the flowers and you're looking at the trees that you've planted, first of all, just the act of being outside, and there's a lot of evidence now of the grounding effects of just being present around the natural environment. It grounds us. It literally, in that sense of grounding and pulling you down in a very good way to come back into yourself, to come back into the rhythm, the natural rhythm, the natural environment around you. So that helps, because this technology breaks us out of that natural rhythm that we're in. There's email apnea, it's referred to, which is when you're kind of hanging over your screen and your mouth is open and you're breathing in a very shallow way. It takes you away from the awareness of what's happening within your body. So if we take a break and we turn to the news or the sports or social media, there is a rhythm in that device. There is a rhythm in the way that information is being presented to you. Like the contrast is reading a book. There's a rhythm to reading a book. It's for the most part asking you to kind of slow down into the rhythm of the words. Whereas for social media, everything about it in the way that modern information is being presented to us is to cut and clip and edit so that it becomes tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter. And that starts to shape the internal rhythm within us, which is an internal rhythm of chaos and constant change and constant adjustment and a constant state of unpredictability. But what you were doing is you were, rather than hyping and bringing more chaos into your internal state, you were actually calming it by going outside. And that's why it's beautiful that you were giving yourself that practice. And that's something that we really try to encourage with people in our programs, is to take brain breaks. And that's the way that we frame it. It's a brain break to really regulate yourself and then come back in with a fresh state of mind to go again. Because otherwise we just keep amping up this level of anxiousness and an internal stress.
Yeah, that I mean, completely fascinating. And you linked it for me, and I never even knew I was doing it for a completely different reason. But when you started talking, it really connected a lot of dots in my head. So I'm looking, I'm like, oh man, where I told you we'd be wrapping up in like 45 minutes, and I think we can talk for hours, because you're really fascinating, and that's interesting. I kind of had an expectation that it would be a lot of tricks and tips, but bringing it down, boiling it down to this very, I want to say it's very simple, but I don't think it's simple to do. So I think the answer is simple. Like what you're saying sounds wonderful, and it really isn't, but I could tell you just from my own experience that if you were talking to Chris of 3 years ago and you said, hey, you need brain breaks, man, you need to go walk outside, I would have given you the answer. I'm too busy. I don't have time for that. Like, there's no way, man. Give me something else. Give me a cheat code. Like, I don't want this, right? And I would have really talked you out of it, like saying, I can't do that. I'm sorry. I don't want to, you're fired. I can't do it, right? And I wouldn't have been happy with that answer, because I would have not seen that it's possible. Now that I know I did it, I'm like you, I'm an advocate for this, telling people, boy, you find something that's away from a screen, because it is just so refreshing. It is, it's so reinvigorating to have that. So, man, I have so many more questions, but we always have a couple that we finish up with, because I think this is really interesting, especially with your path, your career path. I mean, you've done so many things in your life so far, and I'm sure you're going to go on to do so many more. But who would you consider to be one of your greatest mentors? You have someone that you just think, like, I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for that person.
Oh God, that's a great question, Chris. I wasn't expecting that. I mean, without a doubt, my mother is the number one mentor. She passed away about 18 months ago, and she was, she was for sure. So instrumental in allowing me to see the world with a broader set of eyes. Somebody who's shaped my thinking a lot. Some of the people, maybe I could share those as people that are great minds that aren't alive, but I often try and sit with them. Would be Marshall McLuhan, John O'Donoghue, who was a priest and an Irish priest and became a writer. There's also a gentleman called L.M. Sakassis, who's based in the Florida area, and he has a Substack called The Convivial Society, and his writings have shaped a lot of my thoughts. So from a character perspective, my mother, and from some of the work that I do today and thinking about these things, I would put those three individuals up there.
That's cool. Thank you. And it seems like you're an avid reader, especially with your speed reading. So are there any, and it doesn't have to be about this content that we talked about, but are there any books that you've read that you're like, wow, I want to share this book with the world?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's one that I read there at the weekend, which was completely shifted my perspective in so many things, which was called Ancient Futures. And it was written by a lady called Helena Norberg Hodge, I believe her name is. And it was her time in a region of India called Ladakh, which was where the Tibetans were after, it was in a region where the Tibetan people lived anyway, but it was protected after the Chinese kind of reclaimed that region. And she was there when it started to open up to the West. In the sense, when I say the West, I mean like modern life. And she started to see how these people went through massive transformations. as they started to reject their heritage and their culture for the opportunities or the images, let's say the images that the Western path proposed to them. And we're going through something very similar today in what we're seeing with AI, where we're so caught in the temptations of what this will bring us, the possibilities of this greater life. But underneath that, it's going to hollow out the social and the psychological experiences of what make us human. And that's been a progressive element of modernity, is that we've kept progressing towards more convenience, more cleanliness, more hygiene, more efficiency, more productivity. But consequently, we've all moved towards this sort of monoculture, this globalized monoculture where, the Irish comedian Tommy Tiernan has a great line where he says, "I'm sick of traveling because all it is white people shopping." So when he goes to most cities around the world, that's all there is. All the major cities are being stripped of culture. So that's a book that comes to mind. There's another one which is Get Out of Our Light, which is more about attention, which is a really interesting one. And are there any others which I would contribute to that list? Any specific subject matters that come to mind, Chris?
No. Since 2009, I've asked every person this question that comes on as a guest, and we do it because we have avid readers. So I've had everything from science fiction to many other types of books. So these two are excellent, and I've never had them recommended. So I'll put them in the show notes.
Can I also add the Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog? I think that's a fantastic book written by Bruce Perry about trauma and how the brain develops. I think it's also a very interesting book. So, yeah.
So if people want to know more about you, Patrick, what's the best way for them to follow you or to find out what you're doing next?
So I have recently launched a Substack, which is called The Inner Landscape. So it's the inner landscape.substack.com. If people want to check in with those writings, you can always get in touch with me through LinkedIn, and that's the only social channel that I'm on where I share some stuff related to the work that we do. The business that I have is HARA, HARA.co. And that's where our programs are. So yeah, I would say that those are the three platforms. The innerlandscape.substack.com is my, where I write. HARA.co is where I work, and LinkedIn, is where I share. So those are the three platforms.
Perfect. Well, Patrick, I can't thank you enough. This was truly a fascinating conversation. I wish we could have went on for a couple hours, but we'll have to have you back, talk more about this. I think this is going to be a topic that really resonates with the people who listen to this podcast. So thank you for coming on and sharing your journey and your experience with us.
It's been a joy to speak with you. Thank you for your presence, because you've been very engaged and present in the whole time in our conversation. And I would be nothing but thrilled to come back and join you again in the future.
Well, everyone, thank you for joining us this month. As you can see, it was a really fascinating conversation. I can't wait to have you all back next month when we'll have another fascinating conversation with another wonderful guest. Until then, stay safe. See you next month.